Good morning, good morning, good morning. How are you guys feeling today? My name is Mark Fullen, and I just want to say I'm truly excited that you're with us today for worship. We have an incredible day planned out for you. But how many of you are already looking forward to that tryptophan crash that's coming on Thursday? What? No one's excited about Thanksgiving. Wow. Did you already eat the turkey? Okay. Well, I'm excited. We're in kind of week 4 of this series that we've been working on called No Ordinary Family, and I'm just so excited for how Mike's going to land it today. But before we kind of continue on with our service of worship today, I want to make a quick mention of something that I brought up a few weeks back. Whether you've been going to Port City for a long time or you're brand new and maybe you want to learn more about the church or find some new ways to get connected, we have an opportunity that we are offering monthly now called Port City 101. And in fact, our next Port City 101 is going to be on December 8th. It's actually a 2-week class set up to not only tell you about the history, the vision, and values of the church, but it's a great way to learn about all the different opportunities in which you can get connected both inside and outside of the church in our community as well. So if this would be something that would be of interest to you, it doesn't matter. You could have been here for the last 20 years. We really recommend that most people go through this because I think it'll really open your eyes to what God's doing in and through the church and how you can continue to be a part of that story that God is writing. So if you'd like to find out more information, just visit the Connect Center on your way out, and we'll be happy to answer any questions or even get you signed up right there. But beyond that, I want to go ahead and ask you to stand up, say hello to your neighbor, and we're going to continue on with worship today.
Together this morning. I raise a hallelujah in the presence of my enemies. I raise a hallelujah louder than the unbelief. I raise a hallelujah word you were singing over me. You have been so, so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. You have been so, so kind to me. Just sing it out. And oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. And oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. I was your foe, still your love fought for me. 'Cause you've been so, so good to me. Just sing it out. I felt no worth, you paid it all for me. You've been so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. And oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. No shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. Come on, it's true. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. my Savior's scars, victorious, my chains are gone, my debt is paid, from death to life, and grace to grace. Heaven knows that they can soon. How great is the hope that lives in you. The passion that tore through hell like a rose. The promise that rolled back death and its stone. Freedom is worth the life you raised. Where is my sin? Where is my shame? I believe if love paid it all to have my own. How wonderful, how glorious. My Savior's scars, victorious. My chains are gone, my debt is paid, from death to life, and grace to grace. We can declare this truth this morning. When I see that cross, I see freedom. When I see that grave, I see Jesus. Come on, from death to life. Oh, we sing it out. We sing it out. When I see that cross, I see freedom. When I see that grave, I'll see Jesus. From death to life, I will sing your praise in the wonder of your grace. When I see that cross, I see freedom. When I see that grave, how glorious my Savior's scars, victorious, my chains are gone. I believe my debt is paid, from death to life and grace to grace. I believe. Father, we thank you that we can come before you in adoration and praise and declare the truth of who you are in your great name. God, I thank you for that line that we can sing in the wonder of your grace. And when we take hold of that truth, the wonder, it's astonished, it's amazed, it's to constantly seek after you. It's that wonder that is always before us. And God, I just pray that we would rest in that we would rest in this beauty of wonder of who you are, but this beauty of knowing that you are fully capable of all things and everything in our lives, that you're fully capable of taking death to life, that you're taking dust to ashes, that you are fully capable of that because of your great power and the great wonder that you always hold on to. And in the wonder of your grace, that you're constantly pouring out grace to us when we don't even deserve it, but yet you give it to us, that you chase after us, that you follow us and you know us deeply, and you always extend this grace. So God, I pray for us in this room that we would be reminded of that truth, that we would be encouraged by your love, that we would be encouraged by truth. God, that we would always put your name on our lips everywhere that we go. So I thank you for this moment and this time to just say, God, you are good. God, you are fully honored and that you are fully loved. God, I just thank you for this time to give you the praise that you alone deserve. I pray that you would continue to speak to our hearts this morning and that we would learn more about your truth and your word through our pastor. I thank you and I love you, and we say amen. Thank you guys so much for singing and worshiping with us. You may have a seat.
Kaylee and the band, thank you guys so much for leading us in song today. Such an incredible testimony that we are singing about today. I want to go ahead and invite our ushers to come forward to collect our offering. But what an amazing truth we just sang. You know, I love the lines, when I see the cross, I see freedom. When I see the grave, I see Jesus. And like Carson shared with us last week, we've been doing this thing called We the Church for the past few weeks to kind of give you a glimpse, an insight, a picture into what God is doing in and through the body of Fort City. And last week he talked about this idea that we have been called, we are a light to this world. A world that has so much darkness in so many areas. We have an opportunity to be a salt and light and to make the name of Jesus known in a place that so desperately needs it. And you know, this idea of we the church, we want to do this so, because many times there are countless stories that are happening all around the church, and we really wish that we could share all of them with you. But today what I wanted to do is actually invite my friend Denise Nance to the stage. So give her a warm welcome real quick. I wanted to invite Denise because I wanted her to, for one, introduce herself to you all, but also to tell us a little bit about maybe some things that are going on in our children's ministry just down the hall. And so I wanted to go ahead and invite you up here today to do that.
Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Denise, and I'm the large group coordinator in Treasure Island. Is a long title, but essentially what that means is our kids every Sunday have the opportunity to worship just like you guys do, to hear a message just like you guys do, in a large group setting with peers. And so I have the privilege of coordinating the volunteers and some of the content that goes into what that looks like for them on Sunday.
Yeah, and you have a huge team of people that you're responsible for on a kind of a weekly basis. What's about the average kid intake down at Treasure Island?
We have anywhere from like 300-ish to 450 kids, depending on the Sunday.
That's amazing. That is unbelievable. And I know, you have been a mentor and an influence on my children, along with so many more down in that space. But I also know that these volunteers that you lead are amazing people. And so I want to see if you could share with us something that maybe that's kind of been going on, wrestling out in Treasure Island lately.
Yeah, for sure. So like Mark said, we have a ton of volunteers that make Treasure Island happen. One of our core values is that we're volunteer owned. When you have that many kids, it is impossible for 5 staff members to wrangle 400 kids by themselves. So we have an awesome group of volunteers that they totally own their role. And we have one specific small group leader who has just really shown his ownership over the past few weeks. And it's been really cool because he was able to connect with his kid in a very unique way. So the mission of our church is to reach people and to help them walk with God. The mission of Treasure Island is not much different. It's to reach kids and to come alongside families and to help them walk with God. And we take this very seriously, and this small group leader and his ownership took this very seriously and had the opportunity to really connect with a kid who was really struggling with some stuff going on at home. Just a situation with dad in and out and just not totally great. And this small group leader had actually experienced something really similar in his childhood and was able to connect with him and share with him his story and how there is freedom in forgiving his dad, and there's freedom in being in a relationship with Jesus, how ultimately when we are adopted into God's kingdom that he is our father, and even if our earthly father is a present, that we still have that fathership through the Lord. And it was just so cool the way that this volunteer really stepped into that and owned that and really made this child feel loved and cared for. But what was even cooler is that the mom was able to connect with the captain in the room as well and share with her the struggles, because this is her life. And this has been really tough for her, and she was able to connect with this captain and build a relationship and trust with her and have conversation with her, which is even still continuing to happen. And it's just been really cool to see the way that these volunteers have had such a large impact in the life of our kids, fulfilling the mission of reaching kids and to help them walk with God, and connecting with families and to help them in their walk with God too. So it's awesome.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. That is... You know, we, the church, people like us, do things like this. That's, you know, the call that God has given us as a church, and the power and the impact that can have on someone's life, even starting with the little ones that are cared for every day by just incredible volunteers down the hall. If it wasn't for our volunteers, none of this would be possible. So if you volunteer in any capacity within Treasure Island, thank you so much for all you do. My children have been impacted by that. But I'm also very thankful for your leadership along with the rest of the Treasure Island staff and the amazing, amazing things you're doing every single weekend down in our spaces. And what I'm excited about is this next generation of kids that are coming up with people like we have in that ministry. So thank you so much for everything
Thank you,
that
Mark.
you've done.
Thank you.
You know, today we have an opportunity to continue to wrap up this series. And as we continue on with our worship, I want you to just take in the scripture that you're about to see on the screens. In that moment, it talks about this idea that there's freedom wherever the Spirit of God is. And what I want to ask over the next few moments is, as you think through peeling back some of the layers of your life, what is that area that maybe you need to seek out that freedom that can only be found in Christ? And so just take that for the next few moments, and then we'll continue on with Mike and his message today. Thank you.
Family. What are your thoughts when you hear this word? Dinners, birthday parties, graduations, and weddings? Do you think of love, intimacy, and laughter? Or do you think of pain, absence, and conflict? Whatever your thoughts are, family was God's idea. His desire is for you to join His vibrant and growing family. A family marked by sacrifice and acceptance, marked by diversity and unity, marked by an eternal significance. A family like that would be no ordinary family.
Good morning. It's good to see all of you and welcome all of our campuses as we wrap this series up today called No Ordinary Family. There's been a couple of pictures in my head. One I built out, and I'll share with you later, about kind of the way I'm thinking about this series and really the way we think about the church. And the other picture, I think, because I'm having more and more conversations with people about the church, about the direction of the church, about the family, and you can feel the pull. The more familiar we get with the way things are, the less we want for them to change. And the reality is, in the culture that we live in, that's just it's true all the time. It's just so pronounced in our culture, the way things happen and change so quickly. And so this means different things for all of us, but it certainly has implications on all of us. The problem or the challenge that we face is the more self-sufficient we are, the higher our capacity to deal with just myself and my life and my way of life, the more I can control how change affects me, and I can be resistant to it and still get by without noticing. And so I've been thinking about this from a different way. What happens is when people talk about the church and you start hearing conversations, I'm having these all the time, is it seems like it would be like showing up to a football game with your baseball bat and spending the entire football game trying to figure out where the pitcher's mound is. And the reason this is because you're sitting there and you don't ever understand anything that's happening on the field because you can't figure out where the pitcher's mound is and who's going to throw the ball and how you're going to hit the ball. You're ready to play one game when they're actually playing another. I think that's what sort of happens in our culture. We're trying to figure out how the church sort of fits into what's happening around us instead of realizing it's like a completely different kingdom. It's a completely different rule. It's a completely different reign. We have to start looking at this very, very differently. This was the challenge for me in this series, to stop thinking about this idea of family and even the Bible as an instruction book for my family. How can I be a great husband? How can my wife be a great wife, right? I can teach that one all day long, but you get the idea. We look at this and we say, how can I be a good husband? How does this speak to me? How do I raise my kids? How do I do my thing? How do I get my family like I want? How does this work for me? And then we teach on it tactically, and there's lots of great stuff. We've done series like that, and you're welcome to them. I think they're incredibly helpful. We wouldn't do it if it weren't. But there's something more. There's something more significant at play when it comes to who we are and what it is that God has called us and created us to do. One of the things that's really interesting, I love what I get to do, and many of you know we just celebrated our 20-year anniversary as a church, and it's so funny. I was looking back this past weekend, as a matter of fact, there were 2 or 3 things that happened. One is we had we were looking on Instagram. My wife and I were kind of just scrolling through, and we were looking, and there's a young girl, and we know her family well, and it was her first middle school dance. And we were looking at this going, oh, you know, this is her first middle school dance. There's pictures of it. Well, what's really interesting is that I have known her parents since they were in college. And were some of the first people in our church. I actually did their wedding, and now their kids are in middle school. It wasn't long ago when I was down at Fuse Camp, and I was at Fuse Camp, and I was speaking there. This is our high school, middle school camps a couple years ago. And this young girl comes up to me, and she says, do you know who I am? That's always such a dangerous question, right? Do you know who I am? Because like if you say no, it's like, you don't know who I am. And if you say, yes, and you don't know, then you're lying. And that's bad too. So you just have to kind of like feel this thing out. And she says, my dad was in your youth group when you were at the other church. And I looked down and I could see his face because he was her age when I met him. And I remember going, oh my, and you start to see how fast the generations go, right? There's a phrase in parenting that the days are long and the years are short. I think that's a true thing. And so for us, what I want for us to do is to understand that there's something that's implied, not just for you and your family or me and my family, but for us as a people, as a movement, as a family that God has assembled together with all of its complexities and all of its chaos and all of the things that we might wish were different. it's still true for us, and what he's asked of us is this. What sociologists and psychologists tell us over and over and over again is how multi-generational relationships are insanely healthy. Healthy cultures exist when there are multi-generational relationships. And what we are doing in our culture is we become more radically individualized and more radically isolated. We are isolating ourselves from the generation before and from the generation, and each one is just sort of left on its own. There's a good song, a sort of a shameless 80s reference, right? Every generation blames the one before. If you know who that is, you can, tweet me later and tell me who it is, and you might get a prize or something. And but it's this idea that we have this continued generation gap. In our culture, we're obsessed with labeling generations and what is wrong. I don't know when this started. I was somewhere around in my mid to late 20s when I started hearing about it. I'd always heard about the baby boomers and Generation Z and X and, generation, whatever they are now, IY and the millennials and all that. And we're just obsessed with labeling these generations and talking about how we're constantly separating and placing, separating and placing, and separating and placing. So we come in with our baseball bats and we're looking around and there's another game going on. And what we have to start to think about is if that's how the world sort of sees generations, what would it look like if it were to be redeemed in another rule or another reign? What if something else happened, that it wasn't just millennials versus everybody else or Generation Y versus, what if it wasn't? What if there was something else at stake, some other way in which we might live together? What would that look like? Today I want to talk about where the future sort of rests, if you will. This is sort of my attempt at a weight bar. And it's kind of the weight of the future, and where does it rest? Where does it rest? And so this is what I want to look at for the next few moments that we have together. What we've talked about in this series, I'm gonna run through this very quickly. If you have not been here, or this is your first sort of installment of the series, they are on a line on our app, on our website. You're welcome to them, and it might help frame some context for today. But this is what we have essentially said. The first thing is we said that God created a family in order to establish a people. What becomes of the family, what you think about the family, what you think about your family becoming is very important. But he creates a family to establish a people. What this means is whether you are married or not married, whether you have children or not, don't have children, this is applicable to you or a part of this. You are a part of his family that is designed to become a people, a force for redemption in the world. For some of you, redemption might look like your investment in a generation to come. It might look like your investment in your own business. It might look like a lot of different things, but it is, you are a force. You are a part of this thing that is a force for redemption. But part of that means that you and I have to come into this understanding who we are. And one of the things that we have said is this, that if your family of origin can leave you with deep wounds, if your family of origin can leave you with deep wounds, then perhaps what we're hoping, what we're suspecting, what we're putting our faith in is that the family of redemption might be able to bring deep healing. That perhaps your connectivity, the way in which you have entered into this place, to this people, you might find some things, some relationships, some connections, and learn how to receive those in such a way that it brings deep healing and sort of a sense of perseverance and redemption to your own story and to what has happened or maybe what you've experienced in your life. And then thirdly, we've said that basically our ultimate identity will demand our ultimate allegiance. This is about authority, it is about belonging, and that's what we're talking about. These two concepts, and we're gonna try to tie these together in some way today. The first one is authority, because I believe that the family was designed to establish an authority structure within which we live, that this original thing that is given becomes something else. But it's the foundation of it is that authoritative sense and those relational roles that bear the image of God. It's interesting when God chose to demonstrate or to cause his image to be born in this world, he created a man and he created a woman and he put them together and he called them to become one flesh. It is these two roles that become the one thing. So you start to look at this and kind of observe this from that direction. It's an authority structure. The second thing is there's a connectivity, and what we're talking about is a belonging. What we're talking about is not just how do you and your spouse learn how to live. We're talking about what does this do for us? How do we learn to live under this rule and this reign? And how is it that we learn to belong to one another, to really belong? To really belong. Belonging is more than acceptance. Acceptance means you're welcomed here, and if you leave, you'll be welcomed back again. Belonging means that if you're not here, something's missing. They're two very different things. Don't miss this. We're talking about how is it that we become this kind of thing in this. We've talked about this in different ways. What we said is two things that I think it's worth repeating. That the redemption of authority is found in your relationship with Christ. It's not adherence to a bunch of rules. It's not alignment on issues. It's your relationship with Christ. When I learn how to live under his rule and his reign and let that have sway over my life in all of these moments, and when you learn how to do that, together we learn how to live underneath his rule and his reign. We learn a way of life under the rule of love. That's the idea in this. The redemption of that isn't in you getting the right positions on the right issues. It's you learning how to live within your relationship with Christ. That's why we work hard on that. The second thing is, we talked about this last week, that the redemption of belonging begins with receiving. It begins when you stop trying to pay it back or earn it. And this is really important for how this whole thing gets played out and the way the next generation responds. You see, the future depends on the generations to come. I don't know if we don't think this. Most of our future is when we're in middle school and high school, we put little slogans that says things like, the best is yet to come. And what about your future? And your future essentially consists of when you get a job and when you have the relationships in order that you want to have in order. And then after that, time just stops. And everything else is just existing in the future that's already been created. And that's how most of us live. Ask someone who's in their 40s about their future dreams. They're like, what are you talking about? I hadn't thought about my future since I was 18 years old. I have a sign on my desk, right above my desk where I work, and it says, the best way to predict the future is to invent it. To think about the future that we get to be a part of. To think about it, to consider it. This is how it's talked about all throughout the scriptures. You can't get away from it. When God introduces himself, he makes a covenant with Abraham. He says, you will be the father of many nations. In fact, the way they would refer to God is they would refer to him in our scriptures in the Old Testament and in the New Testament as the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. It would be this lineage, this heritage. You see in Psalm 78, he talks about the fact there is a generation that is to come, and our responsibility is to them. This is how it was started in the beginning in Deuteronomy chapter 6 when Moses gathers the people, and he says, here's why you have to teach these things. And look at what he says in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 1 and 2. These are the commands and the decrees and the laws the Lord your God has directed me to teach you to observe in the land that you are crossing the Jordan to possess, so that you, your children, and their children after them may fear the Lord your God as long as you live by keeping his decrees and commandments that I've given to you. So that the reason I'm teaching you is not so you'll live happily ever after, but so that your children's children will benefit. The way we say this around here is that the purpose of the family is for your children's children to know God as God. The purpose of this family is for our children's children, for the generations to come, to know and to serve the same God and to love and to worship the same God that we are serving and worshiping today. Do you think it's gonna look different? You bet it is. Those of you who are not in this room, you can't, but there's a reason there's a flat floor in here. There's actually a couple of reasons. One is if we went belly up, we could always turn this into a basketball gym, and we thought that'd be helpful. But we also recognize that 15, 20 years from now, we might not present like this. There might be something else. We might be sitting at tables. We might be standing in the middle of the room like they were last week at Thanksgiving or Friendsgiving for our overflow and college students. We don't know what it's going to look like, so we want to be as flexible as possible for the next generation to use this however they see fit when it comes their time. You want to talk about the future? I want you to think about 60 years from now, 2 generations from now. I want you to think about your contribution 2 generations from now. Most of us have not even considered it because we're too busy trying to figure out what's going to happen tomorrow. And I get that. It's hard, but if we got to get our eyes up, if we're going to be and become what it is that God has asked us to become, we got to start thinking, this is our job. This is our job. You don't raise your kids to get out of your house. You raise your kids so that your children's children will know God as God. You're raising parents. You're raising people to raise another generation. You're empowering people to empower another generation. Do you see how differently this is to think? Most of us are trying to get our lives in order, and then good luck to the rest of you. This is why there's a generation gap. There's a different way to live this out. There's a different way to do this. Our church is radically aligned around the next generations. We've done a really good job in some ways. We've done a really not so good job in other ways. But there's a reason for this. It's not easy, and it's also a little bit terrifying. I see people who are older than me as they sort of age, and the fear of being irrelevant or not having a contribution. For some of you, that's where you're headed. It's so afraid, and it's so fearful. Whenever we get afraid, we hold on, and we cling, and we grab onto. I'm gonna do the same thing, I can assure you. I've already told people around me, it's like when I'm 90 years old, if I'm not making any sense up here, can somebody please tell me? I don't mean any disrespect. I just don't wanna hold on to something longer than God is asking me. I need people, because I know the more afraid I get of the future, the more identity, all these things happen. They happen to me, they happen to all of us. It's a gut check that you have to have. We have to have there's a way for us to do this. So I've been looking at this and kind of thinking about this. What we're talking about is the purpose. And you gotta start, I just want you to start thinking about this. For those of you who are raising young kids, right, it's tempting to just go, oh my gosh, if I can just keep them alive today. That's an important strategy. But I also don't want you to ever lose sight that those kids that you're raising are gonna be in charge of another generation 30 years from now. And they're gonna know what they know because of you. And y'all, if we complain about the future of the church, and we complain about the future of the country, and we complain about the future of all these things, it is on us to make sure the generation behind us knows how to not just get along with what we've given them, but knows how to raise up another generation. There's some things we have to do around this to understand this, and there's some things that we're gonna have to do that we don't even know how to do yet. We're gonna have to put our knees on the ground and say, God, we need your direction and your help, or else I can guarantee you what's gonna happen. We're gonna do the same thing that everybody else has done. I don't have time to get into this, but you realize why there are so many churches that don't transition from one generation to the next. Because you get in meetings and you go, we've never done it that way before. Anybody ever heard that? It's the kiss of death in any organization. When you start saying we've never done it that way before, you can rest assured you have lost vision for the future. It's true in your family, it's true in your life. When you can't look and say, what is it I'm still dreaming about? I'm 49 years old. People say, Mike, what do you know, it must be nice. You figure out what you want to do with your life. I'm like, no, I haven't. I'm figuring it out all the time. I have so many crazy ideas and so many things that are happening. I'm so excited about the future. And what we've got to do is to start looking and saying, how do we make sure that the next generation feels the same way? Because the weight of the future is actually crushing them, and it doesn't have to, because God has given us the capacity to participate in it. And I think he's done it in this structure that he's called a family, that we've reduced to this nuclear thing. And he said, oh, no, that's not what it is. That nuclear thing explodes into a movement that is for the world, that brings redemption in every sector of our culture and every corner of our world. That's a beautiful thing to me, and that's what I want for us to be a part of. So here's how it goes. I was reading this, and I marked this down probably 6 or 8 months ago. Just kind of noodling on it, but it's in 1 Corinthians chapter 4. Paul's writing a letter to this church in Corinth, and he's like, you gotta be a church, you gotta be a church, you gotta be a church. It's not an individual instruction guide on how to believe about various issues. It's, you gotta be the church, you gotta be the church, you gotta be the church, you gotta be the church. Are y'all clear on what the letter's about? So here's what he says. And he talks about the fact that he's not trying to shame them. He's not trying to make them feel bad. He's not trying to compare his story to their story. He's just going, I want you to get this. And here's what he says. Even if you have had 10,000 guardians in Christ, you do not have many fathers. For in Christ Jesus, I became your father through the gospel, and therefore I urge you to imitate me. Now, most of us just read right past this because there's some really cool stuff after this, and there's some really cool stuff before this that you want to underline, you can talk about and tweet about and yell at each other about. This one's not so much. And the most applicable part of this seems to be, I urge you to imitate me. And so we jump there. But what about this? What does it mean if you have 10,000 guardians, but you don't have many fathers? What does that even mean? Like, what would he be saying there? I began to think about this because 10,000 guardians. So a guardian, and you see this throughout the New Testament, you actually see this throughout a lot of ancient literature. A guardian was essentially designed to protect. It was designed to protect. It was also a person who helped people interpret or understand the Old Covenant law and how to apply it to their lives. So you see Paul using this in the New Testament a lot. But this idea of guardianship was really about protecting someone who wasn't ready for responsibility. Think of it like this. As long as you're not 18, you can do whatever you want and your parents are responsible for, right? You've heard this. You are protected from being responsible for things that you can't be responsible for. That's the concept of a guardian. But a guardian, in this sense, has no responsibility. They just protect you from responsibility. But a father, on the other hand, this is how this would have been understood in the first century. A father's design was to empower. One was sort of a tutor that sort of takes responsibility for you. The other is someone who gives you responsibility and says, I'm gonna empower you to do this. You've had many guardians, but very few fathers. How does this apply in our culture? We have a lot of guardians, right? You can think of a guardian maybe like a podcast. We have millions of people giving us all kinds of great information on podcasts, giving us information, telling us how to tell other people how to do. We have a culture where we just commentate and critique everything else that's going around without any response. We are protected from having any responsibility for it because we can stand on the sidelines. We have many guardians. A lot of us, we have all kinds of information coming, but no one who looks at you and says, let's do this. Let's get our hands dirty. Let's step out into this. That's what fathers do. They empower. That's the picture here. Now, for some of you who grew up and you have this picture in your head that's not super healthy of what a father looked like, this is what God is talking about. This is why the redemption and the reconciliation of us to the Father is someone who says, I'm here to see you and to empower you. It's interesting, he uses this later on in 1 Thessalonians. He's writing another letter to a church. He uses this same analogy. And I don't know why a man would ever use an image of a nursing mother or an illustration as though he has any idea what that's like, but Paul does, and so we'll just go with it. Just as a nursing mother cares for her children, so we care for you. Because we loved you, look at this, because we loved you so much, we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well. Surely you remember, brothers and sisters, our toil and our hardship. We work night and day in order not to be a burden to anyone while we preach the gospel of God to you. Now he's setting up something here. He's saying that we didn't want to be a burden to you. We wanted to be helpful to you. We, on this side, we want to make sure that we are empowering and working with you. He's not telling them how great they are. He's saying we have done everything we can for your sake. And this is how he says he talked to them. I love this. You were witnesses, and so is God, of how holy and righteous and blameless we were among you, and we believed. For you know that we dealt with each of you as a father deals with his own children. And he's going to give us a picture here. As a father deals with his own children, here's how he says. Next verse. Encouraging, comforting, and urging you to live lives worthy of God who calls you into his glory. I don't think we have the right picture because this sounds kind of, it means to literally give courage. To encourage someone is to give them courage, to speak words or to put them in situations or to provide them with opportunities that require courage. To encourage isn't just to say, oh, you're so beautiful and you're so nice. It's like, no, get out there and try this. To comfort doesn't mean just, you're so sweet. To comfort means they've tried something, they've probably failed, and now they need to be re-encouraged again. It's a safe place to fail. Most of us have grown, we've taught a generation that it is wrong to fail. If you fail, you're bad. If you fail, you're a failure. When actually failure is the only way you ever find success. And you know this to be true. And what we've got to do as the next generation is give them opportunities to fail well and debrief and learn to become who they are. We've got to encourage and bring comfort. I love this last one, urging you to live lives worthy of God. This idea, this concept of urging someone actually has to do with seeing them. It means that I see you. I see you, I know you, I believe in you, I'm gonna push and help you. Now please hear me, I need to probably call time out here. This does not mean get your tail back out on the field and stop complaining. That's not what this is. Oftentimes that's just sort of vicariously trying to compensate for something you didn't have when you were growing up. And we push that on our kids. To see them is to see them. Proverbs say like this, train up a child in the way that he or she should go. That word means you've got to know them and their bent and their inclination and help them become the person that they have been called to be and not trying to redeem the person that you weren't. We've got to understand this. This is a serious call to step into a fatherly role. And I'm not talking about it in a gender sense. I'm talking about it in a role sense. It is a serious thing to see someone and to help them and call out of them what you see God doing in them. It changes the trajectory of people's lives. Someone said, Mike, I think you could be in the ministry. I think you might be someone who can help people understand the scriptures at a different level. I think I see this in you. I'm like, no, I want to be an architect. That person made me stop being an architect and start doing this. It has implications. I told a kid, hey, you could be a leader in our youth group. She quit playing soccer, of which she was going to go to college on a scholarship, and started volunteering in our youth group. Her parents came to me and yelled at me about losing the money to go to college. It has implications when you call out of people things. This is a serious call. What this ultimately comes down to, and where we ultimately have to work together, is this sense of understanding that authority fundamentally rests on trust. It fundamentally rests on trust. What I'm talking about is not power systems, not power struggles. I'm talking about trusted authority. The only reason that God has power in your life is not because he can kill you, because he won't. He killed his son instead. The only reason that he has power in our lives is because we trust him. That's the way he set it up to work. That's how he set it up to work. The only reason that we have authority, not power, authority. The only reason we have authority, the only reason I have authority in my kids' life is because they trust me. It's the only reason. And when they're 2, you might have to exercise some power. But you're not exercising that power in order to exert your will. You're exercising that power in order to build trust. 2 very different things. It's trusted authority. It's how do we learn how to leverage this? How do we learn how to use this? How do we learn how to do this within the context of a relationship? It's always, 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 always relational. It's true with your employees. It's true with your teachers, with your parents. It's true with everybody. If you're going to live in the kingdom of God, it's always relational. Here's why this is so important. If you can distrust, if you can justify distrust, you can always justify disobedience. If I can discredit you, I don't have to do what you say. That generation, they don't know what they're doing, and then I can do what I want. Mom and dad, they don't know what they're talking about. I can stay out as late as I want. That person, they're an idiot. I can do what I want. That politician, they're this way. I can do what I want. If you can justify distrust, you can justify disobedience. That's anarchy. It's isolationism. It's ultimately sort of the foundation of what we live in, which is just radical individualism. Belonging, on the other hand, requires something different. It's interesting when I began to look at this. Authority is actually designed. When God said, be fruitful and multiply to Adam and Eve, it's kind of interesting. He didn't just mean, hey, have kids, good luck. He said, be fruitful. Be fruitful. Something needs to become. There's some vision, some imagery to it. Be fruitful. It means that something more gets displayed. Be fruitful and multiply. He talks about the fact, he says, I want you to subdue the earth and exercise dominion over it. What he says here is that what God gave us authority for is to give authority, to continue to give authority. When I say it like this, authority was designed to, first of all, let me change this, that's the EM, to empower. And secondly, it's designed to expand. When you tell your kids to obey you, it's not just to exert your will, it's to build trust. Why? Because you are learning to empower them to give commands one day. You just want your kids to pick up your shoes. You don't need all this mess. just pick up your shoes. No. You're actually doing something way more than you thought. You're creating. You're causing. These are serious things that we're invited to do when we exercise and wield authority, to empower and to expand. The reason this is so important, and I'm going to kind of hopefully show you this in the next 3.5 minutes. What's easy is to just go, I'm going to do what I want. We live with chronic autonomy. We don't want to be obligated to anybody else. And what's happened is this continues to create, one generation leaves something to the next generation, and then they do what they want to do with it, and we just kind of shake our head and wonder, and where's the world gone? And you know the whole deal. The reason this is connected to belonging is because in order for authority to continue, it has to be both given and received. It's a different economy. It's a different game. I'm giving you authority, and it has to be received. Why? Because I've been given authority. The authority that I've been given, I give to someone else. It has to be given and received. And the third thing, I think this is the most beautiful thing, is it has to be connected and continued. It becomes a part of what has already been done. This is the only way that builds the future, that redeems the future that God has designed. So here's what I want to show you. I need like a volunteer, someone who's preferably under 25. Can I see somebody over there? We got anybody that's 20 or 25? Yeah, come on up here. Tell me, I know your name. Tell me your name again. Come on up here. You don't mind? Trey? Trent. Sorry, Trent. Come on. Oh, yeah, I see Trent. I couldn't see. Come on up here, Trent. How old are you, man? You're like 16, 15. Nice to see you, man. And you got hair that I'm jealous of. All right. So this is Trent. Trent's 15. So I'm 49. So Trent's kind of about the next generation. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you, I've been lifting the future for a long time. And I'm ready to like give it to you. So you gotta sort of help me carry this. All right. Now, can you take this?
Yeah.
Yeah, take it. No, like for real.
I can't.
Why not?
I don't know.
You don't know? Because I'm not going to let go. I'm holding on to it, right.
Yeah.
So where are you going with the future? Yes, so I'm not going to give it to you if you don't know where you're going. Like, do you see the problem? Like, if Trent wants this, he's like, dude, I want to do what I want to do. I want to be my own man. I want to get it my own way. I'm like, well, yeah, I want you to do that too, but you don't know where you're going. And you know what? I've got a lot of experience, and I can tell you how to do it. In fact, if you just listen to me, you'll be fine. Have you ever said, if you just do exactly what I said, you'll be fine? And it's like, no, I need someone to empower me. And at some point in time, I've got to be willing to real reluctantly, let go. Sorry. And then the future sort of rests on the next generation. Trent, thank you very much. Don't take that, you can just put it back down. Thank you for playing along. Good to see you, man, thank you. Hey, by the way, the song that I quoted in the beginning was by Mike and the Mechanics. Have you ever heard of them? Didn't figure. What's wrong with the next generation? So here's the thing. Here's the thing. This is both way easier than we think, and it's way harder than we think. Do you know how you empower the next generation? One little thing at a time. Remember 1,000 little things? It's true. One little thing at a time. That's how easy it is. Every time you let someone else do something or make a decision, or you provide an opportunity for them, every time you let them do something, and here's the challenge, right? You remember teaching your kids to drive? And you're sitting there in the driver's seat when they're 15. You're like, stop. Go. No. And you're instructing them every single moment of the day. And it is so easy. You know what's hard to do? This is what I had to do. I remember when my oldest daughter was learning to drive, I remember I have to go, I got to zip it. I got to zip it because I'm not going to be in the car telling her what to do. I got to see what she's going to do if I'm not here. I got to zip it. and you do the push on the floor real hard and try not to grab. But it's so important because if you just tell them all the time, when they pull out the driveway, the only confidence you have is they know what to do because you've told them to do it. They have a guardian, not a father. And I can tell you, it is hard to let go. Do you know why it's hard to let go? Because we will no longer have the control that we thought that we had. That's why it's hard. We get good at doing things and we think this happens because I said this and this happens because I said this and this happens because I said this, and we think, man, we are in control. No, you're not. You're just stewarding authority that you've been given really well so that you can actually give it to someone else. And it's easier than we think, and it's harder than we think. So here's my question, and this is how we're going to close, because you say, Mike, what are we going to do? Well, I figured I got about 15 years. I'll be 64 and a half, and my dream of making hammocks in St. John may come true. I'm just kidding. To make sure that the next generation has a church that they are prepared to give to the one after them. If you're younger, I want you to hear me saying, this is not for you. This is for your children's children. We've got to have that deep in our DNA, or else we're going to continue to get more and more and more play into the generation gap, and we'll never learn what it means to actually rest, like put the weight of the future where it actually belongs. One generation has to receive responsibility. The other generation has to trust them with the responsibility that they've been given. So here's your homework. I just want to ask you, who is it that you look to as a father? As one who sees you and who calls you to be the person that God has for you? Who is it that can tell you what you need to hear? Who is it? Who is it? Everybody in this room should have someone like that. You should have someone that you can look to that tells you and calls out of you what they see God doing. And then, who is it that you might be that to? Some people go, well, I'm only in 9th, 10th grade. Perfect. There's a 6th or 7th grader who needs someone to go, hey, I see something in you. I can tell you, both of my girls are immeasurably impacted. Not, listen, I'm a great father, my kids. No, because there were other people in their lives seeing in them and calling out of them. Y'all, this takes all of us. God established a family to become a people, to be a force for redemption, for the generations to come. Let's pray together. Father, thank you. Thank you even for my friend Trent, who has weight on his shoulders. And God, the hundreds and thousands like him, ranging from all ages, that just feel the pressure. God, for those of us my age and up that start to wrestle with a whole other set of issues. God, rather than pull apart and be separated, I pray that you would connect us together and continue what it is that you have started and that we are recipients of. Father, I ask that you would just cause us to be a church, a people, for the generations that remain behind us. And we just posture ourselves to pray and ask and seek how we might both be receivers of those who have gone before us and also empowerers of those who are behind us, that we be trusted authority in the lives of those around us. So I just ask all of this, Father, according to what I believe is your promise and your hope. And I ask this in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ, who is our King. Amen.